I'm Heather.
And I'm Desiree.
And you're listening to
the Perpetually Overdue Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Perpetually Overdue Podcast. My name is Heather.
And I'm Desiree.
And this week we are going to talk about a topic that I think all of us who are over the age of 18, but really probably like early 20s can relate to. And that is what we were not prepared for going into adulting, which is a lot.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's so much to say.
There's a lot to say. I think, too, we live in a very different society, first of all, than maybe perhaps our ancestors, where there was more of a communal living type situation where other people watched your children, taught your children, gave them expertise and knowledge of skills that were going to help them live their life as an adult. And I think that as we have become more and more civilized as a society, we've actually moved further and further away from teaching actual skills that are applicable to everyday life. And that's not for everybody. Obviously, there are many parents. Please don't come for me, parents. They're like, I teach my children. I'm not talking about everybody. But I do think that there's a lot that we don't know about when we go into adulthood, and we just kind of have to learn by doing it. Yeah. And it can be really intimidating, and sometimes it can lead to negative consequences. Either way, you learn.
Yeah.
The positive is that you learn, but I think that there is this unspoken misconception that when you become an adult, you poof magically know what the fuck you're doing. And that could not be further from the truth. I have no idea what I'm doing as an adult.
Nope. Not even an iota of a damn clue.
Do you ever feel like sometimes you're just cosplaying as a grown-up? Like
Yes.
You're playing house?
Yes, I still feel very much like I am that 18, 19-year-old who was thrust into the world and expected to figure it out and know it all. And I'm still feeling like that at 41.
It's so true. I didn't have a lot of older people in my life who I could talk to about becoming an adult. And so I didn't realize that age is just a number. I hate that I said that.
I know.
But it's true because a lot of the times mentally you feel not your age. And as you're getting older, every day I kind of expect at some point, when am I going to feel like I'm 38, about to be 39? When am I going to feel like I'm not in my 20s anymore? It's this weird phenomenon. And if anybody out there, whether you're watching or listening, knows what that feeling is, because I'm sure we're not the only ones that feel that way, please shed some light on it and let us know in the comment section, because it is so bizarre. I'm like, why don't I feel my age? I do sometimes physically.
But me, because I grew up with chronic pains, I've always joked I have felt like an old lady since I was a teenager. So physically, that's always been a reality for me. But mentally, I'm still waiting. Like I will have people in my life who are younger than me, but I forget that because they, to me, come off so much older than me. And then I'm like, wait, I'm older than you? That's not possible. Like when you speak, there's an air of adulthood that you have that I don't feel like I have, which is bizarre. Like you said, it's a very bizarre state of being in our minds. I don't get why or how that works and why that is.
I don't know either. And it's so funny because I have a friend who we used to get together a lot more when I lived in Seattle, but she was the realtor who sold our house to us. And then when we wanted to sell, we used her. And she's in her 40s, late 40s, maybe early 50s. And we're like going out to dinner, going out to get coffee, chatting about life. She's telling me about her life. I'm telling her about mine. And I'm thinking all the while, why is this woman my friend? Like, I am a bebe.
She's hanging out with a child. Why?
Right. And the age, while there is an age gap there, it's not that dramatic.
No, it shouldn't. It's technically not significant. Once you get to a certain age, there's a
Mhm.
balance that happens where
Yeah.
even people who are 10 plus years older than you don't feel it anymore. As if when you're younger, those
Yeah.
10 plus age gaps, you feel the difference.
It's true, and I don't know what it was like from her perspective,
Hmm.
but I could tell that she viewed me as a friend because she would tell me intimate details about her life that I was like, should I be knowing this? Like, I just don't. It feels like a child and adult conversation. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like
yeah.
when you are listening in on what your parents are talking about. I think that there's a lot of factors that contribute to the way that you feel as an adult. But even some of the things that I was expecting to
Mm.
then feel more of an adult, like getting married, for example,
Mm.
a lot of those milestones, people who have children, people who are married, people who have like full blown careers where they're moving up the ladder, things like that, those are all things that you expect to make you feel like you are a grown up.
Mm-hmm.
When you own a house, when you purchase a car, like all of those things. I've gone to a dealership. I've purchased a car that I'm still making payments on. I've gotten married. I don't plan on having any children, but none of these milestones make me feel any older, to be honest. I'm like, now I'm playing house, but with somebody else.
Yeah, with my boyfriend, like that mentality.
Exactly. And yeah, I've gotten used to calling him my husband and referring to him that way, but we're not stereotypical adults. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, we are like anti adults in some way,
Mm.
in that we very much indulge in our inner child
Mm-hmm.
and indulge in the hobbies that we like, regardless. To me, hobbies have no age range.
Here,
If you
here.
want to color in a coloring book, go right ahead.
Yeah.
Like,
If you want to play
whatever.
Minecraft at 41, who the fuck cares?
Exactly. You know, my husband plays magic and I do aesthetic journaling and I have coloring books. I have two
Mm-hmm.
Golden Girls coloring books and one horror coloring book. I have yet to use them, but they're there. They're
Mm-hmm.
things that I was interested in enough to buy. So it is weird because I don't know what it's going to take to make you feel like I have arrived
Mm-hmm.
into adulthood. I'm assuming that there is an age. There is going to come a point, maybe in our 50s or 60s, where we're like,
I don't know because I've heard from people that age that they still struggle with that. That in their head,
hmm,
their body is clearly aging. They maybe don't feel like they're in their early 20s like we do. Maybe they
yeah,
feel like they're in their late 30s, but they're 60s, 70s, but they don't feel their age still. They still feel mentally much younger than where they currently are at. So, I mean,
yeah,
like I said, we still feel like we're in our early 20s or younger. They're maybe feeling in their late 30s. So maybe we do gradually start feeling more like an adult, but maybe we never fully feel that
our age.
moment. Yeah.
Yeah. It's true. I would say that it's a good thing that we don't feel our age because our
Mm.
bodies are constantly reminding us. I remember getting into my mid 30s is when I really started to feel it. And granted, there are many things that contribute to that. Like, I took a very long hiatus from going to the gym regularly, which
Mhm.
is something that kept me spry, I'll say. And in the sense that, like, I have back issues. So if I'm
Mm.
going to the gym regularly and strengthening my back, I'm going to have less back issues.
Mhm.
So, stuff like that, and knowing that a lot of life expectancy, especially from medieval times all the way up to, I don't know, somebody who's a historian out there tell me, but a lot of people wouldn't even make it past their 30s because of
Mhm.
disease,
Yep.
because of consumption. And so I feel like when you hit your 30s, especially your mid 30s, your body's like, I'm ready for the grave. Starts just breaking down,
Oh
decomposing right
god.
before our eyes.
Which is wild to think about. It's so funny because I look at all these like younger people still in their 20s,
Hmm.
approaching 30 and freaking out that they're getting so old. And granted, I was the same, so I get it. But now being past it and looking back and looking at how they're reacting, you're like, oh my God, 20s was just a trial run. It's like you
Yeah.
don't actually really start entering like life and adulting and stuff till your 30s. Really. Most people, not everyone,
No, it's
obviously. Yeah.
true.
But most people, like our 20s really is the trial run into life because society tells us we have to have it all figured out by 30. When in reality, all I keep seeing are testimonials about how it's the opposite. We're all trying to figure it out in our 20s because, like you said in the beginning, no one
Hmm.
prepared us. No one told us. The fact, honestly, looking back, the fact that they tell us at 18 we're adults is kind of preposterous because
Yeah.
we are still children at 18. Granted, it would be different if at 18 we had been prepared for what's to come to
Yeah.
enter adulthood, but most of us are not. And granted, different cultures or different people, I know in a lot of white families, 18, you're out of the house. Go figure it out.
Yeah.
Hispanic moms will hold on to you till your dying day, until you get married.
A couple of cultures are like
Yeah,
that.
I know the black culture también. Wow, where did the Spanish come
I get it saying in there.
from? Wow, that's weird. That's never happened on the podcast.
I love it.
Woo! I know that in black families, they do the same thing. They're very similar to Hispanic parents
Mhm.
that way. Some Asian cultures are like that, though there's more pressure to go make something of yourself. But yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
ethnic cultures, it's very much about the women, not the men. The women stay home with mama
Mhm.
until you get married, kind of deal. Whereas
Yeah.
a lot of white parents by 18, they're tossing you out to go figure out life.
And it's weird because with so much knowledge that we have now of biology and the fact that our brains don't fully develop until we're 25, why are we stepping into adulthood at 18 when our brains are not even fully developed yet? Like, we don't really fully have a grasp on who we are,
Mm,
on what we want, on how we even think, because we're still developing. But we're allowed to vote. We're allowed to have a civic opinion, period. We're allowed to move out of the house. We're allowed to do a couple of different things and on the verge of being able to drink at
yeah.
21. And I mean, a lot of European countries,
By 18,
they
they
by
yeah.
18 you're allowed to drink. But I do think it's all in how you're raised, and I think
Mm,
it's a personal development thing as well, because gosh, I definitely feel like before 25 you shouldn't be making any major life decisions, because
whew, yeah.
you may feel very differently once you hit your late 20s. And
Mm-hmm.
that is a perfect example, getting into it, of something that I was never told when I was younger, is that my brain is not fully developed until I was 25. So why am I expected to make all these decisions about what I'm going to do with the rest of my life, who I'm going to marry, whether or not I'm going to raise humans?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people end up having children in their early 20s. And I'm like, honey, boo boo, you're not even
Mm-hmm.
fully developed yet yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you're now having to take care of somebody else, which then becomes your priority, and you take a back seat, but you're not even finished developing
You
yet
don't even know
yourself.
how to do your taxes. You don't know how to handle your credit. You don't know how to invest money. You don't know any of these things about adulting you weren't taught to do, but you're raising
Exactly.
another human being already.
And let's get into it. A lot of people, when they were going through school, now I don't know what school looks like right now because it's been a minute since
Yeah.
either one of us has been in school, but in high school I was taught how to balance a checkbook and how to fill out a check, which was already pretty obsolete in my generation.
Yeah.
Yes, there are occasions in which checks are being used, but primarily you're using debit cards and
Mm.
sometimes cash. Checks are a very rare thing. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's more of like a boomer generation thing.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody bothered to teach us how to open a credit card, what interest rates were, how to build your credit in the correct way. And I have a little conspiracy theory around that one, in that I feel like our education system doesn't teach that because they want us to get into debt.
Because that's the thing. Yeah, how to handle credit.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even know that you need credit, that credit's such an important thing to live life, so you can get
Yeah.
an apartment, so you can buy a house later on, so you can get your car. You need credit, and no one even teaches you about any aspect of that, period.
Yeah. And any credit, not just a credit card, but if you're getting a loan, school, for example, I know people who had federal loans versus private loans,
Mm.
and the interest rate on those private loans, it's just like you feel like you're never going to be able to pay them off. So there's a huge gap in knowledge there when it comes to something that is so integral
Mm-hmm.
into building your life and your future. If you want to own a home, if you want to have literally anything, there's so many instances in which your credit is run.
Well, even renting in an
Yeah.
apartment, your credit's going to be a factor as
Yep.
well. So it's
If you want to purchase a car, if you
Yeah.
want to do literally anything that you need somebody to vouch for you that you're
Mhm.
credible, they're going to run your credit for.
Yeah. And it's wild because, again, the idea that they have pressured us, again, we don't know what school's like now, but
Yeah.
the fact that there was pressure to figure out what you wanted your career to be at 18 so you can go to college and start working towards that career.
Which was already a scam. The whole thing of college.
Oh, absolutely. But the fact that the pressure, like, you need to go to college, what is going to be your career, figure it out by 18 so you can already start classes. That is asinine to think like that was such a demand for life. And it's no wonder so many of us had what we called quarter life crisis at 25.
Yes. I had mine at 27. It's true because, first of all, what is the point when you have to get your associate's degree? You're not even going to get into your classes for your major until after you get your associate's degree, which typically takes about 2 years unless you start taking courses in high school. So in those 2 years, as you're continuing to grow and to develop, you can be making those decisions about what you want to do. Not just that, what happened to not rushing into decisions about that and maybe just taking some time to think, not going immediately into school? Not that there's anything wrong with that, but again, it'll save you so much time and money if you end up wanting to change your major, because we know that that's something that a lot of people do. And even to a comical point where you hear about people in like sitcoms and stuff, and they're like, they changed their major 20 times. You know what I mean? Because it became like a stereotype, because it became so common that people were switching their major all the time. And it's like, well, no, duh. They're still developing, figuring out who they are, figuring out what they want. It is a lot of pressure. And let me tell you, as somebody who did not go to college immediately, I felt like a loser that I had not yet even applied to or been accepted into a college by the time I graduated my senior year. Mind you, I graduated my senior year a certified nursing assistant. So it wasn't like I was a slouch in the academic arena, but nobody was like, hey, so maybe now's the time to start looking at scholarships and college applications. I had no guidance whatsoever. I was the first and only person in my immediate family who was a college graduate. So I didn't have anybody who had already been down that path. And a lot of us, for second generation, it's like that, right? Like, you don't have people telling you, okay, this is when you're supposed to start applying for colleges. This is when you're supposed to start applying for scholarships.
I mean,
financial aid.
Yeah, my mother was a single woman who survived and hustled in New York City. So that was the only thing she knew. She didn't have a college degree. So that wasn't even a conversation in our household, because in her mind, that wasn't even a factor. No one in our immediate family went to college. It was just like, you got to get out there and hustle and find a way to survive. That was the only way they knew. So even more so, I'm seeing through television and you know, some people who were doing the whole like gotta figure out college and get involved in scholarships and all that stuff. That was such a foreign concept in my family. And then the fact that, again, it was almost a joke in sitcoms. Anyone who like went undecided in their major for the first 2 years and just focused on their associates, that's frowned upon, because it was like, no, you're supposed to have it figured out and start working towards that specifically now. That was very much not a smart way to introduce life to young adults. Like, again, most of us, what we wanted at 20 years old, by 27, we didn't want those things anymore.
No. No.
Oh, thank God I didn't
Thank
pursue
God.
anything that I thought I wanted at 22. Because,
It's so
dear
true.
goodness gracious, oh, I would have been miserable. I would have had to make some, bad decisions.
We talked about this in a previous episode of like, thank God we didn't get married when we thought we wanted to, because we would have been divorced by now potentially. Yeah. And I know a lot of people who did get married really young did go through a divorce.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even just the college thing. It's even just like the everyday life things.
Yeah.
Like, thankfully, I grew up in a household where I had to do chores and I knew how to do my laundry. I knew how to cook. I knew how to clean. But for example, my husband, his mom did everything for him. He wanted to do things. She would not let him do it. And it was more to do with like wanting to create that dependency. So when he got out on his own, when he went to art school, he had to learn to do laundry for the first time. And I can imagine how he must have felt, maybe even a little bit resentful of like, I'm an adult and I don't know how to do any of these things for myself. And I don't know how to cook. I'm eating spaghetti every day. Because let me tell you, that is the white man food when you don't cook. Because my stepdad was white and the only thing he ever cooked was spaghetti as well.
That's hilarious.
It's like their go-to, because all you gotta do is boil noodles. You buy sauce in the store. A lot of the times it's not even doctored up or anything. There's no added seasoning. Just put it on there and then you're good to go.
Oh God.
Sometimes there's meat involved. Sometimes there's not.
Oh, no.
It just depends. It's true.
Because I'm like remembering, at least when we lived together, our meals were simple, but they were good. I mean, we made like rice and beans, and we had breaded chicken sometimes. And
girl, that's not simple to some people though. I'm not saying it's fancy, but it's definitely a step up from just simple. Like, I could make toast and I can boil some pasta, and that's
just
about
plop
it.
the heated sauce in the microwave on top.
Remember the first time when we lived together, we got a rice cooker. And when we grew up, our mothers never made rice in a rice cooker. They made it in a pot. And they just knew things. They just would. And sometimes when they would, sorry, I did this in front of the camera. Sometimes when they would try to teach you how to cook something, they'd be like, put a little bit of this and a little bit, and they're like, how much? And they're like, you know, just no. In Hispanic households, there are no measurements. Nope. So it is one of those trial and error things that you have to go through as you start cooking yourself. But yeah, we got a rice cooker. And I remember Desiree calling her mom, like, how do I use this rice cooker? Mind you, full grown adult, living on our own, and not realizing, oh, you can just Google it. Like, you don't have to.
God. Yeah, that was never even a thought back then.
Right. Because again, we're elder millennials. So we weren't even used to relying on the internet as much to figure out how to do things. YouTube tutorials were not a big thing back then when we were first on our own in like our early 20s. But stuff like that, people struggle with because they never did chores, and now they are living on their own and they're suddenly having to be responsible. We never were let in on what was going on with our parents in terms of like how to pay bills, how to pay your rent, how do you set up utilities. These are things that, at least for me, and I want to say a good amount of people out there, were never told how to do those things.
Nope. The panic that ensued the first few times needing to do that was just crippling, because I was like, I don't know how this works. Who do I call? How do I set this up?
And then you're second guessing yourself. You're like, did I do that correctly? You're holding your breath until you get your first bill and you're like, okay, I did that correctly.
We still have electricity. We still have water.
Exactly. It's one of those things that it's so easy to just sit your child down when you move into a place. Not that it's fun for a kid to like see you set up your utilities or pay bills, but it's educational and it's something that they should know. It's things like that I'm just kind of like, okay. But I learned trigonometry, which I'll never ever use.
Real. I don't even use geometry, which is like the basic math. I'm Like, what do
But
I
I
need?
don't know how to set up a utility or how to use a rent portal to pay my rent or, oh, forget fucking banking shit.
That's what I was about to say. Like, open a bank account and figure that all out. Especially back then, because, like you said, back then you had to have also a checkbook with like your
Mm-hmm.
debit card. They would give you both. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, Grant, guys, I'm talking about back then, especially you youngins, man. Back then, like the back of your checkbook was where you would write down every transaction and multiply and
Yeah.
subtract so you knew how much money
Balancing a
was in
checkbook.
the account. Because you didn't have access, there were no apps back then that
Yeah.
automatically had your bank account balance and all that. That wasn't a thing yet. So,
And it's still a problem. Honestly, I've worked for 2 different banks before. And let me tell you, people still have trouble keeping track of what's in their account, even though we have online banking, all this stuff, because of pending transactions that
mhm.
have not yet come out of their balance. And so they're seeing their balance and they're thinking that they have X amount of money in their account. And they actually don't have that amount of money because they've already spent some of that, but they're not considering it because now that everything's digital, nobody's
Dependent.
keeping track in a
Mhm.
little book anymore. Which honestly, having that ledger was a good way of at least reminding yourself what you have purchased.
Yeah.
When you have a debit card and you're just like, boom, get this, boom, get this, boom, take my
Tap,
money.
tap, tap.
It's so easy to forget all the things that you've purchased.
Yeah.
Sometimes in our household, we'll open up the door and there'll be an Amazon package there, and we're like,
What's
what did we order? What is this? Because you
Yeah,
don't think about
no,
it.
we've really like there are so many pros that have come with technology, but there are so
Hmm.
many cons. And it's really made us so dependent on
Hmm.
just technology and AI to do everything for us. I can't imagine what the younger generation growing up with this already as their like everyday,
Girl,
like that is all they've known. How
they don't know how to read.
I mean, they don't know how to write cursive. Like, they don't even normally write notes. Like, everything is digital now. And it's really bizarre to think that that's the future generations now.
Yeah.
That, again, seeing the cons of how dependent we are. We don't do math anymore, mental math. We have calculators on our phone. Like, we don't memorize phone numbers anymore. They're on the phone.
Yeah.
We don't memorize our bank account numbers. Everything is digital and we rely on it to do it for us. So we don't even try anymore,
Hmm.
which is not good, I think, is my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you that there are some drawbacks to it because, for example, I think Gen Alpha, their the reading level, because they're the ones that are known as iPad babies, their reading levels are atrocious at this moment. And it's not even just, oh, they've lost the art of writing cursive, which is a beautiful thing. And I think that's something that everyone should learn, especially to sign your name
Because
on
I
legal
think. Because
documents.
I think it's more than the just the fact that it's cursive. I think there's more to
Yeah.
it than that, but that's another discussion.
But the reading levels now, like, they're really suffering. And I don't really know very much about the education system, so I'm not going to really speak on that. I'm sure that there are many teachers out there that could shed light on why that is happening.
Mm,
But I do think that it's partially because there's a lot more computers in the classrooms
mm,
now than there used to be. And especially when the pandemic happened, everybody had a laptop that they took home to do
mm,
work in
mm,
so that kids weren't falling behind a whole year. And I get that, but I don't think it ever really went fully back to the way that it was.
mm,
And a lot of the Gen Alpha kids were just getting into school or were in their like formative years in school having to do schoolwork at home,
mm,
which I did that for some of my college courses, but I was an adult that was responsible for doing online work and getting my assignments in on time and everything like that. I can't imagine having been a kid and not having that classroom setting.
mm.
But we're getting off
Yeah,
topic
yeah.
here. We're getting into a whole discussion
That's
about
something else.
technology.
I will say, so some other examples of
Hmm?
things that no one told us about was carrying your health insurance or your car insurance, like having those physically, like having
Girl.
health insurance,
Having
period.
exactly, I was
Honestly,
just about to say, having health insurance, period,
period.
point blank.
Like the fact that even starting a job and that
Hmm.
being a factor, especially in corporate jobs that offer
Hmm.
medical and all that stuff, like you don't know what to do with that. You don't know how that works. It's getting taken out of your paycheck, but like, what do you do?
And sometimes that's a deterrent for people to get medical insurance because they want all their paycheck.
Yeah.
Same thing with taxes. When you have to fill out a tax form to take out taxes from your paycheck, there was a point in time, I remember when I was working for Starbucks, where I was like, I want all my money.
Yeah.
But then when taxes came around, I was having to owe money every time. Well, no duh, because I wasn't having any of the money taken out when it needed to be taken out, or I wasn't having enough money taken out. So it was really hard because nobody walked me through. I remember filling out my first tax form and being so intimidated because I was like, I don't know what any of this means.
Scary as fuck. I'm just looking at all these tiny little print and I'm supposed to fill out these little sections, and not every section. So there's multiple blank sections, but you're only supposed to fill out very specific ones. And if you don't fill out those specific ones and leave the other ones alone, you're going to fuck yourself over with the government.
Yeah. Is it a 0 or is it a 1? What do you put in there? And then same thing with health insurance. And then you don't realize that if you do happen to have a medical issue, which a lot of us in our late teens, early 20s thought that we were invincible and we would never have to go to the hospital for any reason, paying that shit out of pocket can make you go broke. So health insurance is really important if you're even able to get health insurance, depending on what job that you have. And then it's like, here are 3 different plans. Pick which one is going to be best for you. And you're like, how the fuck should I know?
And then there's all of these like hidden details about what's in your plan, what the plan covers, what it doesn't. I just recently got into this whole thing with my insurance agent because I was explaining about how I need, long story short, it was like my gynecologist has to be the one to diagnose my PCOS. But then they're saying, according to the policy, it can't come from the gynecologist. It has to come from the PCP because of this and this and this and this. And I was like, well, I was never informed. Everyone is informed at the beginning before signing their policy of what. I was like, I'm sorry. You think I'm an agent who memorized every detail of the policy? This was never in discussion. No one sat me down and said, so if you go to a gynecologist, if you go to a PCP, this is what this is what that. They don't do that. They go, this is how much you have to pay a month. This is more or less what you might get covered. And maybe you'll have a copayment and maybe you won't. And okay, bye. Like, give us our money. That's it.
Exactly. And honestly, all the paperwork that comes with reading through what your plan covers, it's purposely done in a way in which it's overwhelming. It's basically overwhelming you with information so you don't read it. So therefore you don't know what is covered in your insurance. But then it also uses language that the common everyday person is not gonna know what the fuck it means.
Exactly.
So it's not at all user friendly unless I have a physician sitting next to me or an insurance agent sitting next to me explaining everything.
You need both.
Yeah, right. How the fuck am I supposed to know? This is 90% of life, guys. And the really sad thing, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, is that you don't want anybody to know that you don't know what the fuck you're doing. So we're just all pretending that we know what we're doing. We get the tax form in front of us. We look around. Like, what the fuck am I supposed to fill out?
Like you're in school all over again, where it's like you're looking from the corner of your eye. You're not trying to get caught cheating, but you're kind of like, I don't know what's happening right now.
It's so true. And you're like, I feel like I should know about this. If I'm allowed to go and apply for a job and they're going to hand me these forms, shouldn't I have been told about this and how do you do these things? Forget having to go through purchasing a car or a home. I remember when we purchased our home, I felt like I was having an outer body experience at times. To go through the process of having to compete with other offers and having to make split-second decisions, I don't like that. I'm the type of person that like, I need a minute to make a decision. Same. I can't, if I panic because I'm like, what if it's the wrong thing? And then if it does turn out to be the wrong thing, then I go into this whole spiral. And unfortunately, life doesn't always afford you the time to think certain things through. Like, when we were competing for a house with other offers and the realtor was calling us back and forth to up the earnest money that we were going to, which I didn't even know what the fuck earnest money was until we got into the whole home buying thing. I knew about down payments. I knew that there was a down payment. There's usually that's involved. Didn't know anything about earnest money. Didn't know anything about escrow.
I've heard
Nobody
the term
teaches
tons
you.
of times. Don't know what it does.
When we both moved to Kansas City, didn't know anything about property tax because not all
Oh my
states have that.
God. That's another thing. You
Girl.
move out of state, every state has rules that, again, no one tells you. Even as basic as like automobile, like with the DMV, the DMV
Mhm.
rules can vary state to state, and no one tells you about these things.
Girl, I remember one time in Kansas City, I got pulled over by a police officer. This is so stupid. People are gonna think I'm so dumb for this, but in Florida, you didn't have to have both license plates on the car. That was not an issue. At
No,
least when we were younger. I don't
no,
know
that's still there is there. Where's the second one go?
in the front of the car.
See, that's not a thing here in Florida.
It's not, right. So I get to Kansas City and I remember I registered my car. Again, something that was foreign to me.
Same.
Going and registering your car, going and, you know, getting your driver's license renewed or different things of
Every
that nature.
year needing to renew things. Again, no one tells
Exactly.
you these things.
So I remember going and they gave me 2 plates and I was like, oh, weird. They gave me an extra one.
In case I lose the first one.
Girl. So I put the plate on the back of the car
Uh-huh.
and I put the other one underneath the seat.
I mean, I would have put it in the
What to
trunk.
do with it. And the police officer pulled me over. I'll never forget because it was in a Taco Bell parking lot. And he's like, you don't have your license plate in the front. And I was like, what? Like, it was so foreign
Why?
to me. I
Yeah,
was
why
like,
would you know?
he's like, where's your other plate? I was like, oh, it's down here. I didn't know I was supposed to put it in the front of the car. The way that he looked at me was like I was the biggest idiot.
Oh, fuck no. Did you tell him that
Ever.
you're from Florida and that wasn't a thing?
No, I was so young
Oh,
and
yeah,
intimidated
yeah.
by being pulled over by a
Yeah.
police officer that I just did not even
Yeah.
bother. Oh, I got a good one. Because, again, not knowing about credit cards or credit in general can get you into debt.
Mm-hmm.
Not knowing about loans and things like that also what can get you into trouble.
Mm.
Very simple thing. When you move, going to the post office,
Mm.
changing your address so that your mail goes to the correct address. Now, when you're in your early 20s, you think to yourself, there's nothing important that I need to update my address for.
Mm-hmm.
Wrong. Because I got pulled over by a police officer. I sound like I get pulled over all the time. I don't. There's only been a handful of times that I've gotten pulled over. But I got pulled over by a police officer literally on my way to throw a birthday party for a friend. I had all the stuff in the back seat in the trunk. And he tells me that I have a warrant for an unpaid ticket that I never got because I never updated my address in the post office, so the ticket never got to me. And I didn't know I had a ticket. It was one of those fucking traffic light tickets in Kansas City. I hated that. Remember when you would get off of Red Bridge?
Mm-hmm.
I hated that fucking... It would flash at you even if you stopped.
Yeah.
But if you went a hair over the line...
Goodness.
It would flash at you. Anyways, they went through a whole thing of like litigation because of those traffic light bullshit. But yeah, I just burst into tears because I'm thinking this man is going to put me in the back of his car and haul me away.
Oh.
And he was like, he felt bad for me. He was like, just pay the ticket.
I didn't know I had one.
I would do it right now. But see, those are things that like, that was traumatic for me. That was a traumatic experience.
I mean, the entire time I lived in Kansas City, the 3 years I lived there, I moved maybe like 6 times.
Yes,
Not
girl.
once did I ever think I had to go to the post office and update my address. I think I even moved back to Florida and I still didn't do that because it just wasn't something I had no knowledge that was a thing. I guess in my mind, like in the back recess of your brain, it was like, they're just going to magically know where I live. And
it's like, you don't even have to go to the post office. You can do it online.
That's a whole other.
See, that makes us sound old when we're like, computers, what is that?
But you have to understand, we grew up, these things that are adulting things, when we had to be forced to figure it out, trial and error, we had to figure out the old way of doing things, where computers and online anything was not the norm. It was not even really a thing yet. So it took time to, evolve with the times and realize now
Oh
we can
yeah.
do everything online, but that's not how we were originally taught, trial by fire.
Yeah, I definitely learned learned my lesson then. But there's also things too that I wish I would have known more of, like what my rights were as a human being,
You
as an employee,
never learned
because I
that.
definitely got taken advantage of in some jobs, and
Same.
I didn't even know that that was the case, or that I could have, gotten legal representation. I could have gotten something for the certain things that were happening that were wrong, that
Mm.
were against the law, things of that nature, which I was like, man, there's such a lack of understanding what our rights are,
Yeah.
and
In every sense.
in every sense.
We are never taught those things. Okay, one pro about technology that the younger generation is lucky to have is social media, where people are constantly talking about those things that we
Yeah.
didn't grow up knowing and no one was telling us. And there was really, unless you physically already knew the thing to look it up, there
Hmm.
was no way to know. There was no
It's
way to know.
true.
Whereas now you're stumbling over things on TikTok or Instagram reels and going, oh, I didn't
All
know
sorts of
that.
stuff.
Yeah. We're
Hacks, ways to save money, legal things that could
yeah.
help you out, all of that stuff. It is so beneficial. And I have learned so
Same.
much
Same.
from just like TikTok and Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Not that that should be our only source of
No.
information, but it is something that once you learn about it, you can take it further and do more research and look deeper into it. But yeah, there were a lot of instances where my naivety and my innocence was taken advantage of. I was mistreated in one job in particular that I probably could have sued their asses, but I didn't because I didn't know
Yeah.
any better. But also, I was a Christian at that time, and so I felt like it was my just duty just to forgive,
Mm-hmm.
and no bitterness there, none whatsoever.
I'm just gonna
But
drink my water.
but I wish that, that was something that I was educated on. And granted, yeah, we have civics in school. We learn about government, but we don't really go in depth into things that actually affect our everyday
Yeah, because I
lives.
had civics in seventh grade. What little I remember, even
Yeah.
though I'm taking like what was God, seventh and senior year, I know there was a government class, but it was so basic on what they were teaching.
Yeah. It's like
Really?
social studies, US
Yeah, it
history,
was.
things of that nature.
And,
Yeah.
and again, it was very surface level. At least, granted, the high school I went to was very
Yeah.
much known to be like one of the worst education locations
Oh,
to
good.
attend. So, yay. I mean, yeah, though I could tell stories. But anyway, so even more so, like whatever we were getting was very surface level, just enough to get you to hopefully pass basics in college. And then you figure it out yourself. Another thing that you're not really trained or taught is how much you're going to have to be almost like intentionally self sufficient, where you're going to have to learn to figure things out. Because that's another thing. So many of us relied on either our parents were going to do it, or,
Hmm.
someone was going to figure it out for us, kind of a deal. And suddenly
Hmm.
you're thrust into adulthood and you're being confronted with all these.
Initiative.
You have to take the initiative. You have to be
Yeah.
very intentional on taking the initiative on figuring shit out to
You
adult
do.
properly, when suddenly
Hmm.
you're being faced with rent and bills and jobs and insurance and all these things that require your signature. And that's another scary thing, putting your signature on things and suddenly going, anything goes wrong, you're the one who's going to be at
Yeah.
fault.
Legal documents, baby.
Those are scary as fuck when you're in your 20s.
It's true. And some of the stuff isn't as scary as you think it is. Like I got into debt with a credit card, would not recommend.
Mm.
But no one told me that after 7 years those things drop off.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm being harassed by collectors and I'm just like panicking. They're going to haul me off to jail.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Any
those
moment
types of
now, they're
things.
going to bang on my door.
But I also feel like creditors and companies that collect debts, they make it that way
Mm.
on purpose. They
Oh.
try to instill fear in you so that you'll give your last two dimes to them
Mm-hmm.
to pay off whatever debt. pay your debts.
Yes.
I'm not saying not to pay your debts, but I am saying that the scare tactics of certain things when you're young and impressionable can be very scary, and you realize as you get older, okay, it's not that serious. Now, granted, this is coming from somebody who had a bench warrant because of an unpaid ticket, but like, even in that situation, even if that police officer had put me into his car, taken me to the police station, it probably would have gotten resolved within 24 to 48 hours. I would have been fine. But when you're young, when things go wrong, it always feels like the end of the world.
It feels like a traumatizing experience.
And as you get older, like, okay, I have learned through age and experience that everything can be worked out.
Yeah.
There's always a solution. Let me calm the fuck down. And figure out what I need to do here, because we always find ourselves, even at 38, 39, 40, 41, in situations where like, well, this is a pickle that I got myself into.
Yes.
How did I do this?
Here's another one that's like actually kind of funny. It's not serious at all, but even it's just the little things. Like, okay,
Yeah.
you turn 21. You can go drink. You can go to a bar. Most people who haven't started drinking secretly since like their teen years are entering a bar going, what do I do? What
do I order? I still feel that way. What the
But
fuck
everyone's
do I order?
looking at you like you need to walk in confident, cool, like you know what you want to order. You know that you have to tip the bartender. You have to know all these things automatically at 21, and you're going, I don't know what to do, but I'm supposed to pretend I know what I'm doing here.
Girl, I didn't have my first full drink until 27. Yeah. And at 27, I was like, you know how many vodka cranberries I had? I don't even like that drink because it's the only one that I knew.
Yep. Yeah,
it's so stupid.
I was 22 because I had a coworker. She came from a wealthy family, so they threw her a very swanky, like near Biscayne Boulevard. In like fancy high-rise hotel. So the entire floor was hers, and there was the bar with the bartender and the music, and I felt like the biggest imposter, especially because I was still Christian back then. So I was pretending, I was being a bad Christian. And so I was trying to pretend like I fit in with all her friends. And I was just like, what am I doing here? And they're all at the bar, like, order what you want. And I was like, I don't even honestly know. I have no idea what I ordered because I couldn't even tell you.
Worst case scenario, if you are really anxious about not knowing, which you can always look things up ahead of time.
Now Google.
Not back then. But you could always be like, oh, bartender's choice. Now that can be dangerous. So even to this day, when my husband and I go out to a restaurant and we're looking at cocktails and stuff, I always just be like, what's sweet? Because that's what I like. And there is a stigma against that of like, oh, you're not a real... Yeah,
there's
I get
nothing wrong with that. How is that become such a negative to like...
Yeah, like, oh, you don't like straight liquor? Amateur.
Exactly.
Like, I'll gladly be an amateur, thank you.
Exactly.
But yeah, I'm not a connoisseur of alcohol, so I like what I like. I can't really help that. And I like sweet things, so that's usually what I'll ask, and I'll ask for a recommendation, and 9 times out of 10 the recommendations are good.
Yeah. Oh my God, I remember in Kansas City. Anyway, sorry. That's all. That'll be a whole sidebar for another day.
We'll just do a whole journey on drinking.
Just remember that really tall Viking-looking bartender when we were bar hopping, and
in Westport.
I think so. And I was like, and we asked him, like, give us the sweetest but strongest drink. And he got so excited. He made us these really like fruity nerd candy type drinks that we kept going for more. And
yeah, we were in Westport. Yeah, but we were like Westport adjacent by the time we got to that place, because we were hopping around places and going dancing and stuff. Hilarious. Another thing that I think is really important that you don't really get taught about, at least not when we were younger. I think that this is changing. I think in a very general sense, we know the type of people that we should have around us, but we don't really understand patterns of abuse and things of that nature in friends and in romantic partners. So we tend to go through a lot of heartache and trauma and trial and error with people because we don't really understand when we're being manipulated. We don't understand when we're being gaslit. We don't understand when we're being abused. I remember I went through a whole 2-year relationship with somebody that I lived with, and it wasn't until the relationship was over and I was separated from this person that I was like, oh, that was emotional and psychological abuse that I endured. And it's because I didn't have the tools for that.
Yeah.
No one told me. Everybody's always like, you should pick a nice person, or you should pick people who are kind, and all that very general stuff. But what people don't understand is nobody is that black and white where you're like, oh, that's a villain. Now, there are people that you can very clearly look at and be like, that's a douchebag.
Yes.
But a lot of the even more dangerous people are the ones that are very subtle in their manipulations.
Yep.
They use tactics like love bombing to try to throw you off of their scent. They actually apologize and seemingly take accountability for their actions, even though there's no real change that comes with their behavior. So it's a lot of that more subtle abuse that you're not really taught about. I didn't even know what gaslighting was until I was already like a full-blown adult in their 30s.
Yeah.
And granted, I know these terms may not have been new, but they weren't widely known until social media got a hold of them. And again, that information got out of there.
Media,
But I could have, I felt like I could have saved myself so much heartache.
Yeah. And sorry, go on.
Yeah. No, just had I known. Because it's like at this time, I was very isolated from friends. People that were my friends didn't live in the same state as me, or they lived further away from me, like an hour away from me. So it was really hard to have those conversations and to be like, am I in a bad situation here? I feel like I am, but I don't know. And then it was hard for them to judge because they weren't seeing that relationship in action. So yeah.
And see, with romantic relationships, you're trying to look for like what's healthy, what isn't sometimes, not always. When it can get almost trickier is when that happens within friendships. And that was the case for me. Was I had a pattern of attracting very specific, strong personality, narcissistic people who almost love bombed me in a friendship aspect. And, they loved me. They wanted to be with me. They wanted me to go everywhere. They wanted me to be a part of their lives. They told me all of their deepest, darkest secrets and all these things. But at the same time, were very much gaslighting and manipulating me. It was a pattern that I kept falling into, that these people would come into my life and I would allow them almost subconsciously to walk all over me and to take advantage. And a lot of times they would say things to me that were very demeaning to cut me down, but they said it in these loving ways, that
backhanded
kind absolutely. Of ways. And so here I am in these friendships that I didn't even realize were tearing me down constantly. So in other words, it kept me there. It kept me like leaning on them or relying on them.
Which is what it's designed to do.
Exactly.
It's designed to make you feel like you're inadequate, you are immature, and therefore you need them to grow in wisdom and maturity. And I think that we're always learning and evolving, because even up until recently, like I had to cut a friend out of my life because the relationship was no longer healthy. It didn't start out that way, but it became that way. And it took me a while to realize just how much I was being taken advantage of as an emotional support. It also made me realize I do have to have people in my life that at the base core of who we are, we agree on the fundamentals and values. Because I was the type of person that's like, I like to be open. I like to be open-minded. I like people of different walks of life and experiences. And that is still good. But at the base core of who we are, you have to be a good person. You have to believe that everyone deserves to exist and have human rights. You have to treat other people with kindness. And if any decision that you make contradicts that, then that is not a value that you truly uphold. And I can't be in a relationship with you, especially not a close
That's the thing,
relationship.
especially if these people are your inner circle people. There has
Yes.
to be definitely a foundational alignment there
Yeah,
because, again, they're your inner circle. So you're really letting them into the intimate parts of your life. And to trust someone with that and vice versa, there has to be definitely an equal balance of foundational morals and respect and
totally.
understanding.
And it's not even just like, I'm not talking about like outright bigotry. Like, no
Yeah.
one would be in my life. I'm talking about the people who are like, oh, I'll compromise this person's human rights to get this thing that's going to serve me.
Mm.
No, 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 no. And I knew that this person was selfish. I knew that that's how they were because they had a history of being that way. And that is something that sometimes we can just kind of gloss over and think that
Mm.
that's not going to come back to bite us in the
Mm.
butt. A selfish person will always bite you in the ass.
Yeah.
If they are selfish now, they will be selfish then. There will come a time where that will affect you, whether directly or
Hmm.
indirectly. And then you'll have to decide.
Because I witnessed with the people who were taking advantage of me, they were very much one way that was not good to see with their other friendships. And just
Mm-hmm.
because you thought they weren't that way with you, as Heather said, eventually it will come back because that's the thing. If you see certain behavior with how people that you have welcomed into your inner circle, if they are acting in certain ways towards other people in their life but you think you're
Mm-hmm.
safe from that, that's gonna bite you in the ass because it
Yeah.
will turn around eventually. Because if they can be like that with other people they call friends, then they're gonna do the same thing to you, or they already are behind your back, and that's just not healthy at all and not beneficial for you or anyone in the long run.
No, it really isn't. All this to say, there was a lot that we didn't know going into being an adult. And I will say, in hindsight now, I
Hmm.
do wish that I had asked more questions.
Yeah.
I wish I wasn't so afraid to ask
Mm.
questions, to get help, and to take that initiative,
Yeah.
like you said, to learn things that I didn't know. There were many times where I got lucky
Yeah.
with certain things, the way that I did certain things. My tax form, I was like, I just filled in whatever and was like, hope for the
And
best.
I had to be that person who called mommy on the phone at like a job interview or hiring process where I'm sitting in a table and I'm like, Mom, what am I supposed to put? And where am I supposed to put something? Which doesn't feel good because you're supposed to be an adult, quotation marks.
Yeah.
It actually discourages you in
Yeah.
walking into adulthood when you feel like you have to rely on someone because you don't know these things as society expects that you should.
Yeah, because there is that pressure of you should know what this is. Yeah, I should, but nobody has taken the time to teach me. And yes, while I do believe that it is the parents' responsibility, I do also want to say that a lot of parents are insufficient in their own knowledge
Mm.
because they were not taught those things.
Yes.
Or they have different experiences. My mom came from Puerto Rico. Things were done differently there. Do I expect her to know how everything is done in the United States? And not everybody's a good teacher
Mm-hmm.
in terms of passing on knowledge to their children. Sometimes they think that they're teaching their kids by just doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem with that is your kids aren't always paying attention because they don't know that this is a skill that they're going to need when they become an adult unless they're told that,
Mm-hmm.
unless they're specifically told, hey, pay attention to me while I'm doing
This
this
is
thing because you're
important
going
for
to need to
later.
know how to do exactly. So, friends, this has been a fun episode. We have so many things that I'm sure that we did not cover.
Oh yeah.
So, for our call to action, let us know what your things were. Are there any things that we did not talk about in terms of things that you were not prepared for going into adulthood? We would love to hear it. I'm sure we'll relate to a lot of the things that you say. So, on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube, on any of the podcast platforms, you can leave comments and let us know what are your things so that we can hear about them, learn about them,
Commiserate
relate
with
to
you.
them. Yeah, exactly. We'll be responding to everything on there. And with that said, Desiree, take it away.
So, friends, be sure to like, subscribe, follow, do all the things. If you're on YouTube, if you're on any of the podcast platforms, or on social media, go find us, give us a follow, say hello. And also, quick favor, friends, If you could leave us a review on any of the podcast platforms, that would be tremendous because it really helps us with the algorithm so that others who would also like our content like you do could find us. So be sure to do so if you can and are willing. That would be wonderful. Thank you guys so much for letting us just have fun and yapping along with you every week. We really have been enjoying creating this podcast and continuing to have these fun discussions every week, and meeting a lot of you guys online has been awesome
Mhm.
as well. So until next week, friends, we'll see you soon. Bye.